Greetings, friends. Jay here with Think It Through. Welcoming you back to the channel. Today we're going to talk a little bit about who do we save. Triaging of the souls, if you will. A buddy of mine, we were talking today about the desire to help people, wanting to save the world, doing all the good things, trying to be mentors to others, particularly men, particularly young men. We were kind of talking about like coaching little league games and stuff like that, and maybe doing that in the near future, especially as our sons get older, and doing that. And he was kind of describing a dream of his to put together some holistic package that focuses on, for lack of a better term, making a complete human, a complete man, because we were talking sort of primarily about men. Women welcome to as well, but we are men, and so our focus is on men. And one of the things we were talking about was, who do we focus on? How do you determine who to focus on, who to work on, who to bring with you on a journey? And he was talking about a mentor of his who had kind of talked about, not explicitly, but sort of implicitly towards our conversation, certain answers to certain questions, through that determining that there are certain people who are worthwhile to kind of bring alongside, in this particular case, a business journey, and who to sort of leave on the wayside. And I kind of take an opposite tack. He was talking about sort of, there's 95% of people are not worthwhile, but the 5% is who you pour into, because they're the ones who might make it. And make it, we weren't specifically defining it in any particular way, but we kind of, I think a lot of us know what it means to sort of make it, to find a spouse and to raise a family and to be gainfully employed in some way and to give back to the community and to be physically fit and to be this and that and the other and spiritually deep and things like this. And I take the opposite tack. And maybe this is the sort of the Enneagram stuff. I'm a bit of a 2, which is the helper. I'm like 3 or 4 things every time I take the Enneagram. But one of them is always a 2, which is the helper. And I have always had the proclivity, or maybe the desire is the better word, to save the lost, to bring back from the brink those who are most lost. And maybe that's my calling. And maybe his calling is to guide those who are almost there to the rest of the way there. And I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So what he was talking about was like a 95-5, right? It's like the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, but more extreme. And he was saying that like 95% of people are wanting to change, but not willing to change. Whereas 5% of people want to change and are willing to do the work to change. Because those 95% of people, they want the result of the change, but they don't want the process that the result requires. And so, one example is trying to lose weight, right? Like everyone wants to lose weight, but 95% of people aren't willing to do the work that actually is required of weight loss, or required for weight loss. And we'll see how that works, honestly, with like the semaglutides, the Wegovy's and the Mounjaros and the Ozempics that are out there. We'll see what that does. But, historically, traditionally speaking, you didn't lose weight unless you were willing to do the work. And now we have a bit of a cheat code for that. Maybe it'll help people along the way. But 5% of people in any given domain, my friend was saying, and we were kind of agreeing on, 5% want to change and will commit to the process and will become the person who is capable of implementing or embodying whatever change that is. And my friend's point was, we're going to focus on the 5%. And I agree with him that the 5% makes sense in regards to the idea that with that 5%, there's a higher chance of success, because first of all, there's not a guarantee of success even with those 5% who are willing to undergo the process, because maybe they're willing, but they're unable to remain consistent. They don't have the discipline to apply it regularly. Maybe they have addictions. Maybe they have a lot of other things going on. Maybe their family life is a mess. That takes away from their focus or their time. A higher chance of success is going with the 5% who are willing to make the change and to implement the processes that to get to the end result. That's what's required. And so with those 5%, you also get a little bit more of a limited time commitment, or maybe a more predictable time commitment, that you can say, after a few months, I should be able to kind of let this bird leave the nest and guide themselves. And I think that's necessary, and I think that's noble, and I think it's good. And I think that's what most self-help, self-improvement is focused on these. And maybe it's not even that it's focused on. Maybe that's just who it captures, right? It captures the people who are willing. Because the people who are unwilling will maybe pay for 1 or 2 sessions, or they'll buy books, or they'll do this or that, but they won't actually implement and make a change long term and apply it and maintain it over time. So, I don't know, the thought process I'm having is that the higher goal is to focus on that 95%. It's more difficult, and it's a deeper challenge and a more complex challenge. But if we could save the 95%, we could save the world. Like, that's the goal. That's the dream, right? Like, we're not just trying to pick ones and twos out of the population and select them to come be part of the 10% or the 1% elites. What we're trying to do is to, be the rising tide that lifts all boats. And part of that is to build a better boat. So 95% of people are living in rinky-dink John boats with holes in them, taking on water, barely staying afloat. But what if we could repair all of them? And what if we could get them all to, at the very least, be able to accept the help that is the rising tide of a improved economy, or improved business processes, or better technology, or better whatever. Like, one of the comments I make about AI when I talk to people is that I say I don't think AI is good or bad, but I think it's going to, like most technologies, it's going to increase the gap between the more intelligent and the more capable and the people with more resources at hand, and the people on the other end who are maybe not as intelligent, or not as financially well off, or don't have any resources to apply. It's just going to widen that gap between those people, because people who are able to use AI are going to get ahead that much further, and the people that aren't able to use AI are going to get left behind, as those people often do with really any technological progress or improvement of dynamic systems. They're not usually able to take care of those dynamic systems for whatever reason. They don't have access to the technology, or they never learned the basic skills to implement the technology, whatever it is. So anyway, but I think that's the goal, right? We want to save that 95%, because they're the goal. And that's hard, because the solution for them is not obvious. How do you get someone who wants to change but isn't willing off the bat to undergo the suffering or the pressure of change? I think it's attributed to being a Japanese proverb of some sort, that the same boiling water that hardens the egg softens the potato. And the idea is that it's demonstrating or illustrating that not everyone has the same solutions. And I think that's true. And I think with the 95%, it's less about whether or not the water boils or hardens you differently. It's that it's just going to take a lot more time in the pot because you have a lot more to do, a lot more fat to burn off your soul, as Hemingway might say. So it's going to require experimentation. And I think to some degree with those people, what it requires of those of us who want to guide them or foster their improvement, to some degree it's going to require us to reach into where they are and to drag them into the light and into the zone of proximal development, you might say, to drag them into a place where they can see a little bit clearer and they can, process the information, or they were able to see things that they weren't able to see. That's one of the things I'm thinking about is, who do we save? Who is it? Who is it that can be saved? Can everyone be saved? I happen to think they can. I come from the generation of nihilistic and cynical millennials who thought it was cool to be just black about everything, just the black darkness of everything, emo and goth and all that stuff. But people can change, and people do change. But what we need to figure out is, what can we implement? What can we use to motivate and sustain that change over months and years and decades, so that these 95% of people can become people capable of living the lives that they claim they want to live? So what can we use to sustain that? So thinking about this a little deeper, literally as I'm talking to you right now, it occurred to me that maybe my calling is to search for and recover the lost souls. There's the story of Jesus talking to the shepherd, and he's asking him, what do you do when you have a flock of 100 sheep and one sheep goes missing? And he says, well, I would go find the one sheep. Jesus says, what of the other 99? What about them? And he says, well, I'll have to leave them, for I need to find my lost sheep. He's the one who needs me. And maybe that's what I'm ambitioning to do, is to save the lost sheep, to ferry the lost souls to their final place of rest. Except not rest. Their place that they're meant to be. The place that they are meant to come to endure, to prevail. Because it's the people that are lost, the ones who are lost. They're the ones who need us the most, right? I'm not a particularly found person to begin with, so I know what it's like to feel kind of adrift. And I happen to be someone who, I feel like it's many of us who feel that something has gone not right or wrong with our lives. We feel some sort of inadequacy or some sort of emptiness or unfulfillment, and we can't quite make out what that is. And I think those people, myself included, need the shepherd to guide us. And I've found my way out of the forest to a large degree, out of the wilderness, and it's been no small task. And even now, I don't know how deep in the woods I still am, how far flung into the wilderness I am, but I am. And I'm cool with it. I think I've come to a place where the wilderness is comfortable for me, because it's the place where you can explore the most and you can learn the most about yourself and the world. But that's not most people. Most people feel adrift, and they feel fear. They feel adrift as if they're set out to sea on a dinghy with nothing to save them, with nothing to sustain them. And I think those are the people who need us to come to them the most. And it's going to take work, and it's going to take a long time to get them on a path, to help them figure out what that path might be, to help them maybe wrestle through some demons that are not allowing them to focus on oftentimes the fairly simple things they could implement to get their life sort of tangibly or pragmatically back on track. But the pragmatism is not the issue. The issue is the hell inside their soul, the turmoil. And those people I've been drawn to those people oftentimes without intentionally doing it and without realizing it until like a thing comes up where it's like, maybe that's why we clicked, because you're broken and I'm sort of broken too. Maybe that's what we're doing here. And so maybe that's a point of clarity I've come to tonight, is that maybe my calling is not with the 5% of people who just need a little bit of guidance or organization or a nudge in the right way. Maybe my calling is to the 95% of people who are lost in the wilderness and who have no way. They can see no way. Maybe I can help them find the way. And so we come to another point of fuzzy clarity. That maybe the ultimate way to save the world is to find the 95% of people who want to change but are unwilling to endure the process, and to develop them into a person who wants to change and can endure the process and will endure the process. Thanks for helping me think it through.